Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Banks, the Marketing Manager at Perficient, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar on modernizing your content management platform. Today's session will cover what's next in ECM, modern and innovative approaches to ECM and how those impact digital transformation, and best practices in migrating from Documentum to alternative ECM platforms. We are recording today, and we'll be sure to send an email with information on how to access the recording after the session. And time permitting, we will answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please type those into the chat box. In a moment, I'll hand it over to our speakers, but first let me give a quick overview on Perficient. Perficient is a leading digital transformation consulting firm serving Global 2000 and enterprise customers throughout North America with unparalleled information technology, management consulting, and creative capabilities. Perficient and its digital agency deliver vision, execution, and value with outstanding digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions. We have a broad network of locations across the U.S. as well as facilities. We offer digital experience, business optimization, and industry solutions that cultivate and captivate customers, drive efficiency and productivity, integrate business processes, improve productivity, reduce costs, and create a more agile enterprise. Founded in 1997, we're a public company with more than 2,600 employees. We've formed strategic partnerships with major technology vendors and also have dedicated solution and industry practices. And finally, I'm excited to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. We have John Newton, the co-founder of Documentum and current founder and CTO of Alfresco. And we also have Andy Asadorian from Perficient's Enterprise Content Intelligence team, who leads our content migration practice. And now I'd like to turn things over to John to kick off the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. Hi, everybody. I'm John Newton. And as Stephanie mentioned, I was the co-founder of Documentum along with Howard Chow. And yes, that's me, a long time ago. It was about 25 years ago that we started Documentum, and my background has been almost exclusively in content management and process management ever since. And so my job has also been to look forward and see what happens next. So with Documentum, we started with a traditional software model, and in 2005, we went and started Alfresco. And Alfresco is open source, and we have about 2,000 customers, millions of users, billions of documents being stored in Alfresco. And we have offices around the world. We do development in the UK, and our headquarters are in San Mateo. We've also got award-winning support as well. So that's kind of what Alfresco is. And over those past 25 years, a lot has really changed in content management. So starting off in 1990, when we started Documentum, it was really all about electronic document management. And over the years, I went to enterprise content management, then industry-specific applications, process and case management types of applications, and now we're in a phase of digital transformation. And one of the reasons for that is just the absolute explosion of content. The systems that we built back in the 1990s were designed for a much smaller scale of information, and now we're just overwhelmed and swamped by information. I did a quick calculation, and I'm guessing there's probably about 1 million times the amount of storage available to enterprises today as was available in 1990. I mean, it's kind of on that order of magnitude. It's really kind of hard to know exactly how many, but even within individual organizations, it's tens to hundreds of thousands of times the amount of storage. So clearly there's something changing. And a lot of that change is coming from the different types of forces that are happening in the marketplace right now. This is a slide from Forrester that's talking about digital transformation, and everybody's talking about digital transformation right now. And I really like their definition of what that is. It's all about transforming the customer experience, embracing the mobile mind shift, using digital as a disruption and then taking all that data, all that information to be able to get new business insights, all for the purpose of empowering customers, citizens, and users. And that's great, but what does it actually mean? Well, we have several customers that I think are really good examples of where innovation is happening in digital transformation, whether it's Nike with their brand revitalization efforts, Bank of New York Mellon empowering their clients, the General Services Administration managing policies and practices for the real estate and purchasing processes, or Cisco delivering new innovative products in the marketplace. Now, each of them, as they're pursuing their digital initiatives, are looking for a few things. One is speed and quality of delivery. Yes, they want to go much faster, but going faster is not enough. If you can go faster with fewer resources, and most importantly, maintain the quality of delivery of information, products, and services, that's what the real digital transformation is about. Also, providing end-to-end integration from inception of new ideas ultimately to the delivery of those ideas. Future-proofing the solutions as well and eliminating waste, whether it's physical waste, manual waste, or disconnect, basically going from an analog world into a digital world. But perhaps most importantly of all is to humanize information and information systems. It's all about the people and listening to the people and trying to understand what are they trying to accomplish. And that's the real driver of digital transformation. So in looking at this, we've introduced a concept of digital flow. And we have this is based upon some of the thinking of Forrester as well. But the whole idea is that as companies start to deliver new digitally enhanced products and services, they're delivering not just the product or the service directly, they're actually delivering information about it and pushing information as to how it might be consumed, providing contracts, designs, all sorts of things like that, providing it in digital interfaces and new user experiences for customers and citizens, and then gaining new insights as a result of that. In fact, the very basis of interacting with information that's being processed as part of the digital flow is really what big data is all about. Interacting with websites, interacting with mobile applications, sharing information, interacting with others is the stuff of big data. But big data by itself doesn't really drive new ideas and concepts. It's about collaboration and listening to the customer, listening to the citizen, to be able to take and bring back that information, collaborate on new products and new services, and starting what is essentially a virtuous cycle of information, collaboration, process, and digital acceleration. But the real question is, that's great, but how do you actually get there? Well, we believe it's time to change your thinking. There's three ways of thinking about the problem that are kind of different from the way that software has approached this in the past. One is to apply design thinking and drive people-centric experiences. When you do this, you can increase customer and employee loyalty. Next is platform thinking to accelerate development and iteration of digital initiatives to increase agility. And third is open thinking to support transparency, innovation, and change. Let's go through each one of those in turn. First of all, design thinking. Design thinking is really about focusing on people, their needs, and what are they trying to accomplish. And increasingly, they're doing it with very complex systems. But those complex systems don't need to be complex for users. In fact, they need to be simple, intuitive, and even pleasurable. So design thinking is an essential tool for simplifying and humanizing the experience. These concepts come from a company called IDEO, but actually it's going all over the industry right now. There's a whole issue of Harvard Business Review on the concept, because design thinking isn't just for the Steve Jobs of the world. It's actually for everybody. And it can't be an extra. It needs to be a core competence. So an example of this is Nike. So Nike is trying to get more brand information out onto the website as quickly as possible, but not just the website, actually all their stores around the world and their partners as well, and do it with actually fewer resources, or at least the same resources as before. I'm sure many of you have actually bought Nike products, but what you'll notice is that it's not possible to have pictures of every single item that they sell in every single color, but they're getting there because of digital acceleration. What they did is they actually looked at marketing people as marketing people, not as a generic user, who have real needs and specific requirements, and look at how they work through the process. Who do they collaborate with? And building up profiles and understanding who they are and their likes and dislikes as part of the process. And then actually create digital solutions to be able to accelerate these critical processes within the organization. And that kind of leads us to where and how do we go through this process? Well, you start with the people first. Develop personas of the typical type of people, develop the use cases of the problems they're trying to solve, the storyboards of each of those users, and you do that by interacting with them. Don't guess, work with them through the process. Then you can go to information architecture or process design and iterate through those. Don't start with those, start with the people. Iterate with the users and come to what are the systems and sources that are required. And ultimately, you can get to the point where you're creating the digital solutions and products. Now, if you're a developer, you may recognize this as lean UX or agile development. Well, it absolutely is. But that's not just for development. It's actually for business problems and business solutions and actually getting to new business outcomes. And that's what design thinking is really all about. So where we're taking this is to take open source processes and open source design methodologies that have been invented before so that we don't have to reinvent the process. Using Google's material design is a way that Google actually goes and describes how things like Google Docs, Gmail, and various Google properties work. And then using Google development tools like Angular, AngularJS, and Angular 2 can actually embody material design. So material design is a language to describe user interface and user interaction and user experience. Angular is a way of expressing it. And then it's up to Alfresco to be able to provide the application framework to hook that into the various digital services. And then also to provide the methodologies of how to build and interact for very user-centric design. And that's a very different approach to the way that content management is done in the past. It's not just about technology. It's actually about people and providing real solutions for end users. Next is around platform thinking. Actually, platforms aren't just about technology platforms. Platforms can be business models. They can be business models that allow us to take the core capabilities of an organization and organize them in such a way that they can be delivered digitally, and to actually create a platform that an ecosystem can build around. So this has been a process and a revolution that's been described by some of the academics at MIT. And last year I attended a conference where it was all about platform revolution. And what's really clear is that the fastest growing, in fact, some of the most valuable companies in the world are actually platform companies. So think of Amazon, that empowers e-commerce across a whole range of ecosystem, as well as being a platform to allow people to build new application and digital solutions. Or perhaps it's Uber, that is intermediating between drivers and riders to be able to connect them together and making it possible to be able to transport yourself in ways that weren't possible before. Or Airbnb, that actually owns no rooms whatsoever, and yet it's twice as valuable as Marriott. This is the new way of thinking about this. And an example of this is Bank of New York Mellon, who's actually looking at the bank as a platform, where they talk about the bank technology platform as part of their annual report. talking about how they're providing an open architecture, a customer-centric platform, data-driven insights, using the cloud and creating business solutions for their clients and customers. So instead of their customers using people and interacting via phone and email or whatever in order to do transactions, make it possible for the clients to do it themselves. So basically blurring the lines of all the different parts of the bank, going all the way out to the clients themselves, and making this entirely seamless transactions and interactions. So straight-through processing was one of the buzzwords of the last decade, but it's not really done. Banking is changing, and clearly the banks recognize, disrupt or be disrupted. And platform thinking is a way that they're thinking about this. And this is really the way that McKinsey has talked about digital transformation, is to think about it from a platform perspective. Take your core capabilities, especially your digital capabilities, and use them for agility and use them for growth. Your information systems, your ability to scale on a global level, compliance, governance, cloud, security, and authorizations. Those things that provide you, with capabilities from economies of scale. McKinsey talks about agility rhyming with stability. These capabilities must be strong, stable, and resilient. You open them up using open data, open APIs, open standards, and open architectures. And then you have digital initiatives that can be built very quickly, basically at the speed of a startup, to be able to connect to all these various systems. And McKinsey sort of likens it to like the iPhone. The iPhone is a platform where applications come and go. Well, these digital initiatives will come and go as quickly as they're needed and be replaced as necessary as well when they become obsolete, to be replaced by another initiative. The platform is there for longevity, stability, resilience, and the initiatives are there to serve the customer as quickly as possible. This is not just a technology platform. This is not just a technology architecture. This is a business architecture of how to better serve your clients and customers. And that's where our digital business platform comes in, is to take process services, content services, and governance services across the board and provide that integration with other systems, basic intelligence services, business intelligence, analytics, and on top of a cloud-based or on-premise architecture that can be managed or in-house, and providing the engaging user experience with an application development framework on top to quickly develop and deliver these digital initiatives. And why cloud? Well, perhaps you're already on the path to cloud, perhaps not. But some of the biggest initiatives right now, you can either go and provision an entire data center and spend months, maybe even years procuring the hardware, configuring everything, scaling it, setting up the disaster recovery and redundancy, all the security levels that you require, especially when you're interacting with the outside world, and lots of dollars. Or you can have the big red button that you can click, and within 30 minutes, you could have the same sort of infrastructure and scale of thousands per second, billions of documents, be elastic and cost-effective, only using the hardware that you need at any particular point. So these characteristics of platform thinking make it really powerful to be able to take and deliver new solutions and be able to scale up and respond to customer requirements and market opportunities faster than ever before. And then in terms of open thinking, this is an opportunity to support innovation and change. Mike Olson, the founder of Cloudera, which is the company behind Hadoop. Perhaps you've heard about Hadoop, but Hadoop is probably the thing that really triggered the big data revolution. He made the comment that no dominant platform-level software infrastructure has emerged in the last 10 years in a closed-source proprietary form. Think about that. Once upon a time, everything was built in-house. If it wasn't built in-house, you just OEM'd it from another company. And that's the way we built Documentum. There was no open source back then, and we basically had to build everything. Well, things are much different now. And when we look at organizations like the General Services Administration, which is the largest real estate holder in the world, taking all the overwhelming information that they have, it was really important for them to create a new platform of data to decision, to take all that data that they've had for decades, in some cases over a century of information, and actually glean knowledge and information out of that to be able to have make faster decisions and save money as well. There's a wealth of information that was in there. And what was really important for them was to have open standards and open source to build these platforms so they can take and integrate, innovate, and provide, the core focus of the application, which is to make decisions. And that was really about fueling innovation, not reinvention. And that's what we've been doing right from day one. We had a whole wealth of different types of open source projects that we can rely on that are constantly innovating themselves to be able to build Alfresco and our content platform activity. And everything from infrastructure, databases, various utilities to be able to store information, persist information, and to scale it up and manage it in a very highly distributed way, to using other services like search or integration or new types of services like natural language processing or business intelligence, and integrate that into our platform so that Alfresco and Activity are not just innovating at the speed of their own projects, but at the speed of all the projects that are underneath that. And this trend continues into user experience and application development. A few years ago, if you wanted to develop applications, it was kind of a mix of proprietary solutions and open source solutions, but not anymore. The new responsive user interfaces, the adaptive user interfaces that work either on a phone, on a tablet, or on a laptop, and even TVs, are much different now because they're using things like Angular and jQuery and React and various open source tools. The user experience and application development layer as well is becoming open source. The whole stack is becoming open source. And this is where you see innovation, because why not? Why reinvent these things that have already been created? Why not collaboratively develop these things and fuel innovation instead? So if you change your thinking, you can get the same kind of benefits as well. Through design thinking, you can drive people-centric experiences and increase customer and employee loyalty. Through platform thinking, you can accelerate development and iteration of digital initiatives and thereby increasing agility and maximize resources. And with open thinking, you can support transparency, innovation, and change, and drive adaptability, responsiveness, and competitive advantage. And that's the way we think as well. With design thinking, we drive people-centric experiences to create modern user experiences, and platform thinking to accelerate development and iteration of design initiatives, to build modular open architecture. And then open thinking, to support transparency, innovation, and change, and embrace open source and open standards. So if you want to know what's different about the next generation of content management and how Alfresco is different from the others, here it is right there. It's about design, a very open platform, and open thinking. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Great, thank you, John. Before I turn it back over to Andy to discuss strategies for successfully migrating content and transitioning your content platforms, we wanted to run a quick poll to see where everyone is in their efforts to move to a more modern content management platform that John was referencing. So are you evaluating platform options? Have you selected a platform but haven't started the migration process? Are you currently transitioning platforms and migrating content? Or are you already on a modern ECM platform? And there's also the option if you are not sure. So we'll give everyone another few seconds to respond. Looks like most people are still on the evaluating stage, or aren't sure where their organization is at and moving over to a modern platform. One more second for people to respond. And here are the results. All right, great. Thanks for everyone's responses. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Andy.
Thanks, Stephanie. My name is Andy Asadorian, and I'm a director here in the Enterprise Content Intelligence Group at Perficient. I've been in the industry for over 10 years, focusing on content management, and my focus now is transitioning between ECM systems, helping customers with that transition, as well as the associated content migration. John just gave us some great information about the changing ECM landscape and the movement towards digital transformation, and I'll be giving some information on the best ways to get to where you want to be. Here at Perficient, we like to distinguish between the overall transition and the supporting content migration. So let's define these. The transition is defined as the complete movement of end users between ECM platforms. This is why you are taking on the effort. You want to realize the benefits of moving platforms for your users and your enterprise. The transition includes all of the associated application development, the movement of your ingestion channels, the strategy for rolling out your end users, as well as the supporting content migration. The content migration is defined as moving all necessary content to support your users and enterprise between the legacy and target platform. This is by definition a smaller effort since it is part of the overall transition. It is a key component of the overall transition, though. Oftentimes, we'll work with customers who feel constrained by the content migration. The transition is a little easier to understand. Organizations do application work all the time. They can look at an application and say, hey, I know how long it will take to rewrite that application. But oftentimes, people don't regularly perform large-scale content migrations to support that transition. And it's a little more difficult to understand all of the work involved. You'll just see 100 million documents that take half a second each to retrieve and figure, hey, this is the long pole in the tent. I need to plan around it. While you do need to plan for that, at Perficient, we really strive to craft a content migration strategy that's tailored specifically to your transition. It does not have to dictate it. For example, if you have a large repository of archived content that's rarely retrieved, we can migrate that content first and have that activity occur in the background while some of the more pointed efforts for figuring out how other applications are going to be transitioned occurs. That way, your long pole in the tent occurs seamlessly behind the scenes. Okay, let's focus on the transition. Why do you want to transition? As John mentioned, ECM is changing. We've seen a movement from raw document storage to digital transformation. You want to position yourself and your organization to not be left behind while that change is occurring. One of the biggest components of this change are new and modern requirements from your users and your enterprise. Your users are changing the way they work, and your ECM system should be able to natively handle these changes. A couple of examples are users need to be mobile enabled and work from the field. Big example is being able to commit documents from anywhere. If you're an insurance company and you have claims investigators or adjusters on site, they need to be able to submit photos from wherever they're at. You want your customers to be able to take pictures of attachments for mortgage applications or whatever they're using your systems for and be able to submit those with their phone. Other considerations are, is your ECM system able to natively support cloud storage? This is the big red button. Many enterprises are increasingly interested in leveraging cloud storage for both primary and disaster recovery scenarios. Cloud storage can oftentimes be significantly cheaper and more flexible than traditional on-premise setups. Another significant reason you may be considering transitioning your ECM platforms is for enterprise consolidation. Over time and through acquisitions, you can often end up with several separate systems supporting different portions of your business. Consolidating these into one modern enterprise standard can provide a streamlined and consistent experience for all of your users. It can also provide significantly easier maintenance, support, and enhancements for your technical administrators and developers. Instead of having to maintain several different systems, they can focus on your one enterprise standard that supports all of your separate businesses. Once you've decided to transition to a modern ECM platform, you should consider if consolidating other platforms or parts of your business by bringing them onto the enterprise standard makes sense. Additional considerations when you're evaluating the decision to transition include simply end-of-life considerations for aging technology. If you're on a platform that has an announced end-of-life or an anticipated end-of-life, you're going to need to transition off of it. If there's compliance regulations that are new or modifying and you want to be able to easily adhere to them. And then simply increasing maintenance and license costs for older platforms. As platforms age, the raw cost to maintain the infrastructure can rise disproportionately to the benefit that you're getting from that platform. And knowledgeable administrators and developers to help you with those systems can be increasingly scarce and expensive. So once you've figured out why you want to transition and that you are going to transition, how do you approach it? One thing that we want to make sure you take away from this presentation is that if approached properly, the transition can be much easier than you may think. You don't want to stay on aging and failing technology simply because the transition effort seems too large or too complex. So what are the initial steps when approaching the transition to make it as simple as possible? The first is to understand the full scope of the transition by taking a full ECM application inventory. You want to know everything that's touching the system you're transitioning from. This includes all of your end user applications, any background processing applications that support those, all of your capture sources and ingestion channels, as well as your external integration points. You know, over time, a rigid ECM system can kind of almost act like a plague that grows and spreads into your entire organization. You may have document identifiers stored in external databases that are referencing it. You might have a custom integration developed to a third-party system because it provided a direct benefit to your users at the time, but it's a custom one-off piece of development that's difficult to maintain. Understanding all of these far reaches of your current system is the first step to properly approaching a transition effort and understanding the full benefits that transitioning off of that system can provide. Once you have this understanding, the next step is to create a transition plan. The goal of the transition plan is to determine a logical sequence of events for the transition that provides the least impact to your business and users and the most efficient transition experience. This will generally avoid what we call a big bang cutover, where all of the users of all of your applications go home Friday night using one system, and then they come in Monday morning using another system that they've never seen before. This logical sequence of events should be determined by whatever is relevant to your organization. Do you have different lines of business with different busy periods? Will the availability of developers, business representatives, or testing resources be a limiting factor? Or do you have an impending event dictating the time frame, such as the published end of life for your existing technology or the renewal of some costly licenses for that old technology? Content should definitely be considered when evaluating this, and we'll get into some of the specifics in a minute. But you want to have an understanding if one line of business or application has significantly more content that should affect when it's transitioned in relation to other lines of business. Once you have your transition plan that defines what applications need to transition and when that will happen, you can move on to figuring out how the content migration can support that. Why do you want to migrate content? You want to migrate content because you have to. Migrating the content that supports your applications, users, and enterprise is a necessary part of the overall ECM transition. You don't want to just do this willy-nilly. You want to do this because you have to. Similar to the transition, the first step in approaching the content migration is to understand the full scope and how that will support the transition. Now, the most intuitive factor is simply the number of documents. How many documents do you have in your repository? Now, if you have 10,000 documents supporting one line of business, great. Your cheapest approach may be to just hire a few temps to manually add that content to your new system. That is almost always not the best approach, but for a very small system could be. Now, if you have 100 million documents supporting 100 different lines of business, you're going to obviously have different considerations than an extremely small system. However, there are many things to take into account in addition to the raw number of documents to properly understand the content migration scope. What are the size of the documents? Are they one-page text documents, or do they have 1,000 pages? Or are they not even documents? Are they large audio or video files? As John mentioned, the amount of data we're storing and the amount of data that's useful to organizations is growing exponentially. And we're working with things that aren't even raw documents anymore. And having an understanding of the actual content your users need is very important. Additionally, what is the ingestion rate of this content? The ingestion rate multiplied by the estimated duration of the transition effort is going to give you the true volume of content that's in scope for the migration. How many different types of documents are there? Now, ideally, these should relate to the individual lines of businesses or applications that you identified when creating the transition plan. Are the documents filed into folders or containers? And how will this information be represented in the new system? Oftentimes, users will insist on being able to file documents into folders. However, the underlying implementation can be achieved through creative representations of metadata, leveraging things like multi-valued properties. You don't have to work in a rigid content management concept like having a folder to give your users the experience that they're looking for. Are there workflows associated with this content? Best practice is to process workflows to completion in the legacy system and start fresh, but if you have long-lived workflows that must be migrated in flight, you need to take that into account when approaching the content migration supporting your transition. And are any content conversions required? These are things like considering how you want to render proprietary document types to users in a new system, or something like combining compound documents into a single document. These are many of the factors that you want to evaluate when approaching a content migration and understanding its scope. So, similar to the transition, once you have an understanding of the scope, the next step is to create a content migration plan. The goal of the content migration plan is to define how you will actually accomplish the content migration supporting the transition. This plan should answer all of the scope questions that we just discussed. Additionally, the plan should break down the total volume of content into distinct groups that relate to the transition plan. If your transition is by line of business, what object types does that line of business leverage? Are these object types mutually exclusive to other lines of business? If so, you can separate these lines of business into individual groups that you can migrate sequentially or concurrently, but individually. Understanding how your total content repository breaks down into these individual groups that support the lines of business or whatever breakdown you identified in your transition plan is essential to avoiding a big bang cutover. It enables you to follow an approach that minimizes the impact to your business and your users. You want to make sure that your transition and associated content migration allow you to seamlessly move your users over and avoid a big bang or costly freeze period where users can't work in either system. For each group that you identify, the migration plan should define several things. It should define the property mapping between the legacy and target systems. This includes the target taxonomy and content model that will be used. It also includes any metadata changes and conversions that need to occur to get there. The bottom line is you want to know how this legacy data maps to the new structure, and the new structure should be defined to best support your users and be scalable in the future to handle any changing business requirements. You're also going to want to define any custom requirements like specific content conversions. If you're going to be taking a certain document type and combining it into a single document, you want to know that for each group, so you understand what needs to happen to actually migrate that content. And finally, what you're going to want to define is the actual content migration approach that will provide the most efficient and seamless transition experience for your end users. One of the main considerations for this is the legacy data actively being modified during the migration process? If so, you'll need to consider Delta migrations to capture those changes and ensure that your users have the latest data when the migration is complete and that they don't lose any work or suffer costly freezes to their systems. From a technical perspective, there are multiple approaches that can be taken to minimize the end user impact and provide the most efficient content migration. Some of these include being able to extract content directly from the underlying storage device and bypass time-consuming APIs to access that content. Additionally, there's approaches where you can leave the content on the legacy storage device and only access it directly from there when requested by a user in the new system. And this can be done without requiring active licenses for the older systems. Another approach is dual committing content and metadata for a period of time to synchronize both the legacy and new systems. This can provide a seamless transition for users. And then rapidly ingesting content into the new system. For example, with Alfresco, if content is stored on-premise, you can do what's called an in-place migration that is extremely efficient. The exact approach to use can be and should be tailored to exactly what best supports your specific transition plan. It does not need to dictate the transition or be the limiting factor. It should be specifically chosen and customized and tailored to exactly how you want to transition all of your users over. A few examples of this in practice. For two large companies in the healthcare space, we helped them transition off of expensive aging technology that was rigid and restrictive. This included performing content migrations of over 1 billion and 250 million documents. The result was a positive ROI for the customers within the first year simply by not having to continue to pay the costly licenses and maintenance for the aging systems. It was also their first step towards an enterprise-wide consolidation of their platforms. It provided them a roadmap for future consolidations and severed them from being reliant on the old stagnant stack that's difficult to upgrade and can't handle their future requirements. To enable the rapid migration for these customers, we leveraged some of the aforementioned techniques of accessing the content directly from the underlying storage device, and we used our Migrate on Demand product, allowing us to leave content on the legacy storage device and only access it directly when a user requests it. For a Documentum system, this can involve using custom DQL to extract all the metadata, including everything we need to be able to subsequently access that content directly from the storage device. Using techniques like this, you can physically move content as fast as it can be done, which really opens doors towards your transition plan and timing and provides a very seamless experience for your users. They don't have to wait for their content to move. Another example is for a large national insurance company. We helped them transition to a modern ECM system. They were simply outgrowing their current setup, both from a raw document volume perspective, as well as the ability to meet their growing user base with increasingly complex requirements. Some of the requirements that they were able to subsequently handle included allowing mobile capture of documents, native cloud support for their DR environment, and they're able to scale horizontally to easily support the expanding user base and document volume. All of these requirements were able to be easily implemented on the new system, which either would have been impossible or required extensive customizations to be able to handle before. This customer's transition included a content migration of over 450 million documents. Here, we also leverage Perficient's Migrate on Demand product to enable the high throughput and the fastest migration possible. But we also leveraged our dual commit technique, since their user base and applications could not be easily segmented into exclusive groups. Using the dual commit technique allowed seamless impact to their business users because content was available in both systems during the transition and until it was complete. So I hope I provided some insight into how to approach a transition and the associated content migration. And hopefully you guys found that useful. Stephanie, I will turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Andy. As a reminder, we're now going to open up the call to questions that have come in through the chat box during the session today. And if you have any questions, feel free to type those in now. The first few questions that we have are specific to Documentum. The first question is, how will Captiva be affected by these changes?
Okay, this is Andy. I'll take this. So our understanding is that Captiva is viewed similarly as the Documentum platform. It's included in the acquisition, but there's not very much published information about it. Based on EMC's use and roadmap for Captiva prior to the acquisition, as well as what we've seen with post-acquisition technologies from OpenText, we think that it will be supported for some time. It's not going to be immediately sunsetted or have an end-of-life announcement, but no enhancements, very few enhancements or detailed roadmap for expanding the technology will exist. So it'll be there, but it's not going to really grow.
There's also open source alternatives as well, such as Ephisoft, EPHESOFT, that we've been working with. It's a bunch of ex-Kofax guys who have gone and created an open source alternative to imaging capture, as well as working with companies like Kofax as well. So there are many options that are available if you're moving to something like Alfresco.
Great, thank you. The next question, and Andy, I think you alluded to this in your presentation, but are any programs offered to switch to alternative ECM solutions?
Sure. At Perficient, we have specific processes and tools set up to enable easy transitions between platforms. We're happy to work with any Documentum customers on a transition plan and path for them, including the associated content migration. And John, I'll let you speak to anything that Alfresco specifically offers.
I'm sorry, offers specifically for, again, sorry.
For transitioning off of Documentum onto an Alfresco platform.
Yes, okay. So I think you've covered it quite well, that in-place migration is possible. So the whole, you can just leave the content exactly where it is. And as you said, you can use DQL or a number of different tools to be able to extract the metadata and make it possible to move it over to Alfresco. Likewise, I have seen instances where Alfresco is sitting on top of Documentum, and so Alfresco accessing the content directly. It's one of those things that open source makes anything possible, including how do you access content? Well, it just goes directly to Documentum to be able to pull it out. So that might provide a very good transitionary program going from one ECM system to another.
And then we had a question about when out-of-the-box SharePoint would be a suitable replacement, or if it would be a suitable replacement for a Documentum platform.
Sure. So what we've seen with SharePoint and how it's used, you would only ever want to really consider SharePoint as a suitable replacement for lower volume systems without high ingestion rates or high user bases. With SharePoint, if you're very careful and conscious, you can set up good taxonomy and classification structures, but there's less enforcement of these structures. It's more of the wild, wild west in terms of the metadata and classification of documents. And so you need to be very careful that you don't get bad metadata or inconsistent metadata or unstructured metadata for your documents as time goes on. So if you're looking at a pure storage and retrieval system that doesn't have very complex collaboration requirements or sending documents externally, or really any of the significant requirements that traditional ECM and new modern ECM systems are designed to handle, like compliance regulation, then SharePoint could be potentially a suitable alternative. However, you would really want to be very careful about evaluating that and make sure that you don't just end up having a file share that people drop whatever they want into without any sort of structure.
Yeah, we often see Alfresco and SharePoint sitting side by side. A lot of organizations do have SharePoint, but it isn't really applicable for many different types of content applications as you described. Any sort of scale, any sort of workflow, any sort of sophisticated metadata requirements such as process control, records management, things like that. It's not the best tool. We also talk about number of users. If you have over 1,000 users, then SharePoint just starts to get a bit unwieldy, especially if you want to have a shared system to be able to go across many different organizations and interrelate information. Likewise, volumes. You get any sort of even modest requirements on volumes, you just don't want to go to SharePoint. So it could be there as a collaboration tool interacting with a content repository, but a lot of organizations, even if they have SharePoint, tend not to think of it as their enterprise content management system.
Great, thanks John, thanks Andy. It looks like that's about it for the questions. If we happen to miss your question, or if you have any additional questions and want to reach out afterwards, we will be reaching out after this webinar. We encourage you to follow Perficient's team online, as we have new information that we typically add daily. You can visit Perficient.com and click on the Insights tab for our blogs, white papers, and additional upcoming webinars. So thanks again to our speakers, John and Andy, and we hope everyone has a great day.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.